He had always believed that love meant sacrifice. That when you truly love someone, there's no limit to how far you're willing to go to see them happy, safe, and well. For years, he stood by her side through every storm, every tear, and every setback. They dreamed together, planned a future, and made promises that echoed late into the night. But none of that could have prepared him for what was about to happen when the doctor delivered the devastating news that she needed a kidney transplant. His heart sank. There was no hesitation in his mind. Without a second thought, he volunteered to get tested. The odds were slim, but fate seemed to smile on them. He was a perfect match. Friends called it destiny. Family members praised his bravery. Strangers admired his selflessness. The days leading up to the surgery were filled with mixed emotions: fear, hope, anxiety, but above all, love. They sat together on the hospital bed, holding hands, whispering promises of a lifetime together after this ordeal. She kissed his forehead, tears streaming down her face, thanking him for being her hero. And in that moment, he believed more than ever that their love could conquer anything. The surgery was successful. His body, now weaker, had given her a second chance at life. As he lay in the recovery room, hooked to machines, fighting waves of pain and exhaustion, his thoughts were only of her. Was she okay? Was she smiling again? Was she breathing easier now? When she walked into his room a few days later, looking healthier and more alive than ever, he felt that all the pain had been worth it. Her eyes glistened as she approached his bed, holding his hand tightly. "You saved me," she whispered. And he smiled, believing those words held the promise of forever. The following weeks were like a dream. They planned romantic getaways, talked about setting a wedding date, and imagined a house full of laughter and memories. He felt like the luckiest man alive. Little did he know, the nightmare was just beginning. It started with late-night phone calls she couldn't explain, sudden mood swings, moments where she would pull away from his embrace, staring at her phone with a nervous smile. But every time he asked, she reassured him, "It's just stress, nothing more." His friends began to notice too, whispers of doubt, subtle warnings. But love made him blind. He refused to believe that, after everything they'd been through, after giving her a part of himself, she could be hiding something so dark. Then came the day that shattered everything. He found messages on her phone, conversations filled with affection, but not for him. The words were clear, undeniable, and each one stabbed like a knife to the heart. She had been seeing someone else, someone she met shortly after the transplant, someone who had been with her while he was still healing. The confrontation was explosive, shouting, crying, accusations flying like broken glass across the room. She begged for understanding, claiming confusion, weakness, moments of vulnerability. But the damage, it was done. And just when he thought it couldn't get any worse, she packed her bags and left, walking away from the man who had risked his life for hers, leaving him not just with a scar on his body, but one much deeper, carved into his soul. Days turned into weeks, and the pain didn't fade. The emptiness grew louder. The questions became unbearable. How could someone betray you after receiving the ultimate act of love? How do you move on when every heartbeat reminds you of the person you saved, only for them to break you? But this was only the beginning of his story. What happened next would leave even the most skeptical speechless. If you think you know where this is going, trust me, you don't. Stay with me until the end, because what's about to unfold is something no one could have predicted. The days following her departure were a blur. He wandered through the empty apartment they once called home, staring at the untouched coffee cups on the kitchen counter, the photographs still hanging on the walls, and the half-packed suitcase she left behind in her rush to escape. Every corner of the place echoed with memories he no longer wanted to remember. Her laughter, Once the music of his mornings, now felt like poison seeping into his lungs with every breath. At night, sleep became a luxury he could no longer afford. The bed, once warm and shared, now felt like an icy grave where dreams came to die. Every time he closed his eyes, flashes of the surgery room would appear, images of him lying vulnerable on the operating table, giving away a part of himself, while she was already emotionally drifting towards someone else. His phone became both his worst enemy and his most dangerous obsession. He scrolled endlessly through old text messages, rereading her words of love, promises of forever, declarations that now sounded like carefully crafted lies. He kept checking her social media profiles, even though he knew it would hurt. And there, it was, photos of her with the new guy, smiling, living, as if he had never existed. One evening, unable to bear the weight of it all, he grabbed his car keys and started driving with no destination in mind. The city lights blurred as tears clouded his vision. He drove past familiar streets, parks where they once held hands, restaurants where they laughed over cheap wine and future plans. Every place, every corner, haunted him. In a moment of reckless impulse, he found himself parked outside her new apartment building. Sitting there for hours, engine off, heart pounding, debating whether to confront her or just disappear forever. But deep down, he knew that no confrontation would erase the betrayal. No apology could stitch back the pieces she had shattered. His health began to decline. The physical toll of the surgery, mixed with emotional devastation, created a storm inside him. He started missing doctor's appointments, skipped meals, isolated himself from friends and family who tried to pull him out of the darkness. But the pain, it was relentless. And then, just when he thought he had hit rock bottom, a letter arrived at his doorstep. No name, no return address, just a plain white envelope with trembling handwriting. Inside, a single sentence that sent shivers down his spine. You think you know the truth, but you don't. Panic surged through him. Was it her? Was it a joke? Or was there more to this story than he had realized? Questions spiraled in his mind like a tornado without control. He tried to trace the handwriting, comparing it to her old notes, but it didn't match. Fear started crawling under his skin. Like ants on fire, determined to find answers, he began retracing every step of their relationship. From the first date to the day she left. Conversations, events, places, anything that could explain why someone would send such a cryptic message. The deeper he dug, the more unsettling it became. A friend from work, someone he hadn't spoken to in weeks, reached out unexpectedly. During their conversation, the friend hesitated before dropping a bombshell. "You're not the first guy she's done this to." The words hit like a punch to the stomach. Apparently before him, there was another man. A story eerily similar: quick romance, sudden health crisis, emotional manipulation, and then betrayal. The pattern was too clear to ignore. Fueled by a mix of rage and determination, he contacted the previous boyfriend. Their meeting was awkward at first, but as they exchanged stories, the puzzle pieces began to fit. The same emotional traps, the same excuses, the same disappearing act. It was like reading chapters of the same twisted book. Together, they decided to dig deeper. Background checks, old records. They discovered that she had moved from city to city, leaving behind a trail of broken hearts and unanswered questions. Her ability to manipulate and vanish was almost surgical in precision. The most disturbing discovery came when they found out she had changed her name multiple times over the years. Each time she entered a new relationship, a new identity was born, a new persona, a new lie. But the question remained, why? What was driving her to do this? Was it money, attention, or something far more sinister? Late one night while reviewing hospital records, he found something that made his blood run cold. During her stay at the hospital, There were discrepancies in her medical files. Certain tests that should have been done never happened. Medications she claimed to take were never prescribed. Doubts flooded his mind. Was her illness even real? Had she faked the entire health crisis just to manipulate him into giving up his kidney? The thought was unbearable. But all evidence pointed to one chilling conclusion. Desperate for the truth, he contacted the doctor who oversaw the transplant. After several awkward phone calls and a lot of pressure, the doctor agreed to meet him privately. And what he learned during that meeting would change everything. The doctor, looking visibly uncomfortable, admitted that there had always been questions about her case, the urgency of her need for a transplant, the missing documentation, the inconsistencies in her medical history. But by the time doubts arose, the surgery had already been performed. Sitting in his car after that conversation, he felt a cold emptiness settle inside him. He had been manipulated at a level he never thought possible. Used not just emotionally, but physically, for one of the most selfless acts a human being could do. But the most haunting question of all remained unanswered. Where was she now, and what was she planning next? The nights grew colder, not because of the weather, but because of the growing realization that he had been nothing more than a pawn in her carefully orchestrated game. Every act of kindness he had shown her now felt like part of a script she had written long before they ever met. The betrayal burned deeper than any physical scar left by the surgery. His mind became a battlefield. Between moments of sheer rage and crushing sadness, there were instances where he questioned his own sanity. Was he exaggerating everything? Had he created conspiracies in his head to justify the heartbreak? But every time he held the medical records in his trembling hands, reality slapped him hard. Determined not to remain a victim, he started documenting everything, every message, every email, every piece of medical paperwork. If she had done this before, she would likely do it again. And he refused to let another person fall prey to her manipulation. The idea of saving someone else gave him a strange sense of purpose amid the chaos. Through late-night research and endless calls, he tracked down more people from her past. Some refused to speak. Others, when they realized someone else had suffered, like them, opened up with stories that sounded frighteningly similar. Each testimony painted a portrait of a woman capable of wearing any mask necessary to get what she wanted. Then came the most shocking discovery of all. A newspaper article from another city, dated 3 years prior. It told the story of a young man who died under mysterious circumstances shortly after donating an organ to his partner. The partner's name? Different, of course. But the photo? It was unmistakably her. Cold sweat trickled down his spine as he stared at the faded image printed on yellowing paper. Her smile in the photograph was the same one that once made his heart skip a beat. But now, it felt like the grin of a predator satisfied with her hunt. The urge to confront her grew stronger with every passing day. But there was one problem. She had vanished again. No social media updates. No digital footprints. Nothing. It was as if she had disappeared into thin air. Out of desperation, he hired a private investigator. A man with experience in tracing people who didn't want to be found. Days turned into weeks, but finally, a lead. She had been spotted in a neighboring city, using yet another new name, working at a small cafe. Already charming a new target. Armed with this information, he decided to face her. To look her in the eyes and demand the truth she had hidden for so long. The drive to that city felt like a journey into his own darkness. Every mile was filled with conflicting emotions, anger, heartbreak, fear, and a lingering sliver of hope that maybe, just maybe, there was an explanation. When he arrived at the cafe, he spotted her almost immediately, laughing, smiling, placing her hand softly on the shoulder of a young man sitting at a corner table, her new victim. His heart raced as he watched the scene unfold from the safety of his parked car across the street. He debated his next move. Should he storm inside and expose her in front of everyone? Should he wait for her to leave and confront her in private? Or should he warn the new guy discreetly and disappear, leaving her to face her own web of lies? Before he could decide, something unexpected happened. A black car pulled up in front of the cafe. Two men in dark suits stepped out, their expressions serious, their movements calculated. They walked straight to her table, whispered something in her ear, and within seconds, she stood up, visibly shaken. Curiosity turned to alarm as he watched the men escort her to the car. Was this a police operation? Had someone else reported her? Or was this something more dangerous? His instincts screamed at him to follow, and without hesitation, he started his car and tailed them at a safe distance. The chase led them to a secluded building on the outskirts of town. He parked far enough to remain unnoticed but close enough to observe. Minutes passed, then an hour. The building remained eerily silent. Doubt crept in. What if he was walking into something much bigger than he understood? Unable to control his curiosity, he approached cautiously, peering through a cracked window. Inside, she sat at a table under harsh fluorescent lights, facing the two men. Papers were spread out in front of her. A third person entered the room, an official-looking figure with a badge clipped to his belt. They weren't police. They were investigators from an international fraud task force, and she wasn't just a manipulative ex-fiancée. She was wanted for crimes spanning multiple countries. Organ donation scams, identity theft, emotional fraud. The list went on and on. His knees weakened. The woman he had once imagined spending his life with was now the centerpiece of an international criminal investigation. The depth of her deception was beyond anything he could have conceived. Suddenly, one of the investigators pulled out a folder and laid several photographs on the table. Victims, dozens of them. Faces filled with pain, sadness, and betrayal. Among them was his own. As he stood frozen outside the window, realization sank in. He wasn't just another heartbroken man. He was part of a much bigger story. A victim in a web of lies that stretched far beyond anything he had imagined. His hands trembled as he backed away from the window, his mind spinning with images, facts, and overwhelming emotion. The truth was more horrifying than he ever expected, and still, the story wasn't over. As he stumbled back to his car, his heart pounded like a drum inside his chest. The air felt heavier, every breath like inhaling smoke. He sat behind the wheel, staring blankly at the steering wheel, unsure of what to do next. Part of him wanted to drive away and never look back. Another part needed closure. The drive home felt longer than usual. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky with streaks of orange and red, as if nature itself reflected the turmoil inside him. Memories flooded his mind, her laughter, their late-night conversations, the soft way she used to trace circles on his hand while they watched movies. How could something that felt so real have been so fake? Once home, he sat in the dark for hours. The only light came from the glow of his laptop screen. He searched online for anything related to her. Real name police reports, news articles, missing person cases, anything that could help him piece together the puzzle. What he found was more disturbing than he could have prepared for. Multiple aliases, multiple cities, victims from different backgrounds, some stories eerily similar to his, others far worse. There were whispers in online forums about men who had lost everything, savings drained, reputations ruined, some even left bankrupt. It wasn't just emotional destruction. It was calculated devastation, but there was something else. A pattern he hadn't noticed before. Every city she left behind had one thing in common: an unexplained disappearance. At first, he dismissed it as coincidence, but the more he looked, the more the dots connected. Panic set in. Had she been involved in something even darker than fraud? The thought chilled him to the core. The woman he once trusted with his heart, And his health could very well be connected to crimes far worse than broken relationships. His phone buzzed unexpectedly. A blocked number. Against his better judgment, he answered. The voice on the other end was low and distorted, almost unrecognizable. But the words were unmistakably hers. "Stop digging. For your own good," she whispered, before the line went dead. His hands trembled uncontrollably as he dropped the phone onto the floor. The threat was clear. She knew he was getting too close to the truth. Fear gripped him tighter than ever before, but strangely, it also ignited something inside him, defiance. He reached out to the private investigator again. This time, not to just track her, but to expose her. Together, they compiled every piece of evidence they had: messages, photos, testimonies from other victims, medical inconsistencies, and the recording of her threatening phone call. They prepared a full report and submitted it anonymously to the International Task Force already investigating her. Weeks passed with no word. Each day that went by, he felt like a hunted man, looking over his shoulder, expecting her to appear in every shadow, every parked car, every unfamiliar face on the street. Then, one rainy afternoon, the investigator called with news she had vanished again, this time leaving the country entirely. Rumors suggested she was now operating under a new identity somewhere across the ocean, targeting new victims. The sense of defeat was overwhelming. After everything, after the emotional wreckage, the physical scars, the sleepless nights, and the relentless search for justice, she had slipped away once more. But just as he was ready to let go of hope, an email arrived. No sender, no signature, just a single line. "Thank you for saving my life. I hope you find peace." Attached was a photograph. It showed her standing alone on a deserted beach, staring out at the ocean. The image was grainy, almost as if taken from a great distance. He stared at the screen, unsure how to feel. Was it closure, a taunt, a genuine farewell, or just another piece of her elaborate game? Days turned into weeks, and slowly, he began trying to rebuild his life. Therapy sessions helped him process the trauma. Support groups for organ donors and survivors of emotional abuse became his sanctuary. He started jogging again, eating properly, and reconnecting with friends who had worried about him for far too long. But every so often, late at night, when the world was silent and sleep felt far away, he found himself staring at that photo, wondering where she was, wondering if she was planning her next move, her next victim. And then, just when he thought the chapter was finally closing, another envelope appeared at his door. No address, no stamp. Inside, a single item, a hotel KEYCARD. No note, no explanation, just the beginning of something he wasn't sure he was ready for, because with her, the story never really ended. Sitting at his kitchen table, he held the hotel keycard between trembling fingers, staring at it as if it were a puzzle piece from a nightmare he couldn't escape. The cold plastic felt heavier than it should, as though it carried the weight of every unanswered question, every sleepless night, every tear shed in the dark. For hours, he debated what to do. Part of him screamed to ignore it, to throw it away and walk away from everything, to close this chapter of manipulation, lies, and emotional torture. But another part, the part that had already bled, already been broken, whispered that maybe, just maybe, this was his final chance for answers. Against his better judgment, he packed an overnight bag, grabbed his phone, and drove toward the address printed on the back of the keycard. The hotel stood on the edge of town, old but still functional, its neon sign flickering like a warning in the night as he entered the lobby. The receptionist didn't even ask for his name, simply handed him an envelope left for him earlier that day. Inside, a short note in her handwriting: Room 314, midnight. His heart raced as he climbed the stairs. every step echoing through the empty corridor like the ticking of a clock counting down to something inevitable. When he reached the door, he hesitated for what felt like eternity. His hand hovered over the handle, sweat pooling in his palms. With a deep, shaky breath, he inserted the keycard and pushed the door open. The room was dimly lit, a single lamp casting long shadows across the walls. And there she was, sitting in the corner, legs crossed, looking at him with an expression he couldn't read. There was no smile, no tears, just stillness. As if she had been expecting this meeting since the day she walked away. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. The air between them was thick with everything left unsaid. Regret, anger, confusion, pain. She gestured for him to sit, and reluctantly, he did. Then with a calmness that didn't match the chaos she had caused, she began to speak about her past. The countless names, the endless running, the lies she told not because she wanted to hurt people, but because she didn't know how to stop. It was a sickness, she said, one she couldn't control, one that consumed every relationship she entered. He listened in silence, not because he forgave her, but because after everything, he needed to hear it from her own lips. The truth, or at least her version of it. Every word was a blade, reopening wounds he had spent months trying to heal. She handed him a small box. Inside, a USB drive. This, she said, contains everything. Names, locations, details of every person I hurt. Maybe with this, you'll find the justice I never could. And then, without another word, she stood, walked past him, and disappeared down the hallway. He sat there for minutes, staring at the closed door, heart pounding like a drum inside his chest. Leaving the hotel, he felt a strange mixture of relief and emptiness. The keycard, the conversation, the USB drive, it all felt surreal, like scenes from a movie too twisted to be real. Yet it was his life, his story. One he hadn't chosen, but one he had survived. Back home, he plugged the USB drive into his laptop, staring at folders full of names and evidence that could destroy her for good. But as his finger hovered over the send button, preparing to forward everything to the authorities, he paused. Because even after everything, some small, fragile part of him still wondered if she had the capacity for redemption. If exposing her now would save future victims, or finally push her beyond the point of no return. In that quiet moment, he realized something. Life rarely gives us clean endings. Sometimes we're left with unanswered questions, with scars that never fully heal, with memories that revisit us when we least expect. But one thing was certain, he wouldn't let her story define his future. He had survived her, learned from the pain, grown stronger through every tear, every sleepless night. So he closed the laptop, took a deep breath, and walked outside to face the world again. Because in the end, survival is the greatest revenge. And to everyone watching this right now, if life has handed you betrayal, heartbreak, or moments where you felt used and broken, remember, your story isn't over. This is just one chapter. If this story touched you, if it made you reflect on your own battles, leave a comment below, telling us your thoughts. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe for more real, raw, and unforgettable life stories. Your support helps us bring more truths to light. We'll see you in the next story.